I stood between two attorneys in a cold conference room, the kind with stale air and leather chairs that creaked when anyone shifted even slightly. My hands were clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles turned white, and I kept staring at the glass pitcher of water in the center of the table, pretending it held answers. My brother smiled no, smirked across the polished oak, his wife already texting someone under the table. My parents' lawyer cleared his throat. As stated in the will, the estate will be divided as follows. I barely heard the words. I was bracing for something modest, something decent, something that said I mattered, even a little. To Mr. Carter, Jr., the primary residence located on Lakewood Drive, the investment accounts totaling $200,000, and the vintage Mustang currently in storage. My brother's smirk widened. His wife squeezed his arm like they'd just won a game show. And to Ms. Elena Carter, a pause, a longer one than necessary. The secondary property in Bitterroot Valley. I blinked. "Excuse me?" I said before I could stop myself. "The Bitterroot cabin? That's barely standing." The lawyer gave me a sympathetic glance, the kind professionals master to show just enough empathy without risking liability. "It is legally titled as a residence with land attached, yes." My brother leaned back in his chair, lips twitching. "Looks like Dad left you the shack with the squirrels." I stared at him, stunned. "And that's it? There is no cash allotment listed for you in the will," the lawyer added. "Your father was very clear on his final wishes." I didn't speak. I couldn't. I felt like someone had cut all the air out of my chest. Outside the building, the wind bit at my cheeks as I walked numbly to my car. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off for what felt like an hour. I could hear my mother's voice echoing from years ago. "We love both of you equally. Always remember that." Lies, I thought bitterly, because love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't divide wealth like poker chips and leave your daughter with an abandoned husk of a cabin in Montana. Travis, my fiance, was waiting when I got home. He had set the table, made dinner, poured wine. I walked in, holding the folder of legal documents, and dropped it on the table like it was a bomb. "What did they give you?" he asked. I opened my mouth, then closed it. "A rotten cabin," I finally said, "in the middle of nowhere. Ryan got everything else." He blinked. "What do you mean, everything else?" "The house, the money, even Dad's damn car." "What the hell?" he hissed. "You're kidding." "I wish I were." No, this isn't right." He stood, pacing. "You need to fight this, contest the will, something." "I won't." "Elena, are you seriously going to just take this?" "It was his choice." "It was favoritism." "I don't want to go to court, Travis." "He humiliated you." "I know." "Then why aren't you angry?" "I am," I said, voice trembling. "But it's not the kind of angry that screams. It's the kind that sinks. Quiet, heavy, and I don't have the energy to scream anymore." Travis looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. Maybe I didn't either. "So what now?" he asked. "I guess I'll go see it. The cabin." "Seriously?" I need to know what he thought was worth leaving me. "You think there's some message in this?" "I don't know," I whispered, "but I need to find out." That night, we didn't speak much. I went to bed early, curled into myself, listening to the silence that used to feel comforting. Now it just felt cold. A week later, I packed a bag and booked a one-way ticket to Montana. Travis didn't offer to come. He said something about work, about how I needed space. I didn't fight it. Bitterroot Valley was colder than I expected. Wind that cut through jackets, pine trees that leaned like old men guarding secrets. The cabin stood crooked on its foundation, part of the porch sagging like a tired sigh. There were spider webs in the windows and moss on the steps. But the door opened, the lock still turned, and inside it smelled of dust and time. I dropped my bag on the faded plaid couch and walked through the creaky rooms. The kitchen still had chipped blue plates in the cupboard. The back bedroom had a mattress covered in plastic and the framed photo of a deer on the wall. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried not to cry. This was my inheritance. This was what I was worth to my father. A place even raccoons had probably abandoned. But as I sat there, my fingers brushing against the edge of the headboard, I felt something click. Literally. A small panel shifted open. Inside, it was a velvet box. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a key. And a note. 4 words written in my father's sharp block letters. "When you're ready, Dad." I stared at it, breath catching. What the hell was this? The wind howled outside like it knew something I didn't, and I realized then this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of wind rattling the loose shutters. The cabin creaked like an old man stretching after a long sleep. I had barely slept. The note sat on the nightstand where I'd left it, the key beside it catching what little light filtered through the cracked blinds. I picked it up again. Just 4 words. "When you're ready." What did that even mean? Ready for what? I searched the cabin inch by inch that morning. The floorboards, the cabinets, even behind the dusty books on the living room shelves. Nothing. The key didn't fit the storage shed out back, nor the small locked drawer in the desk by the fireplace. I sat by the hearth for hours, cold seeping through my jeans, staring at a fire that wasn't lit. That afternoon, I walked into town. Bitterroot Valley wasn't big. A general store, a diner, a post office that still used hand-stamped letters, and a small library that looked like it hadn't seen a renovation since the 70s. I asked around about my father. Not many remembered him. A few old-timers recognized the name Carter. One of them, a man named Walter who ran the hardware shop, tilted his head when I introduced myself. "Elena, you're Daniel Carter's girl?" I nodded. "He passed, didn't he?" I nodded again. Walter sighed. "He used to come through here every fall, bought lumber, tools, said he was fixing up the old place." "It doesn't look fixed," Walter chuckled. "Well, he wasn't building the cabin. He was working on the land." I frowned. "The land?" "Yep. Always said something about preserving history, protecting it. Never explained much. But he was out there, digging, mapping, talking to that woman from the university." "What woman?" "Marla. Teaches anthropology over in Missoula. Smart as hell. Used to visit him out there, take notes, ask questions." My heart skipped. I didn't know any of this. "Do you have her contact? Think she left her card here once. Wait a sec." He rummaged through a drawer behind the counter and handed me a bent business card. "Marla Fay, D.P. of Anthropology, University of Montana." I stared at it like it might start glowing. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I stared at the key, then at the moon outside the window. Maybe my father hadn't left me a house because he thought I needed space. Maybe he left me a question because he thought I needed answers. The next day, I called Marla. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Dr. Fay," she said. "Hi, I think you knew my father, Daniel Carter." There was a pause. "Yes, I did. I'm his daughter. I inherited the Bitterroot cabin. I found your name. Walter gave me your card." "Oh," she said softly. "I wondered when you might call." That stunned me. "What do you mean?" "Your father said if you ever came, if you ever found the cabin, I should help you finish what he started." "What did he start?" "Preserving something that should never be erased." She agreed to meet me that afternoon at the edge of the Carter property. When I arrived, she was already there, a petite woman in a faded parka with binoculars around her neck and a leather satchel slung across her shoulder. "This whole area," she began, gesturing toward the hills, "used to belong to the Bitterroot Salish people. Your father found artifacts, tools, bones, layers of their history buried under centuries of dust. And he never told anyone? He tried," she said, "but the land had been rezoned years ago. Developers wanted to buy it. Your brother almost did sell it once." My jaw tensed. "But your father stopped it. Said the land was sacred. Said he wanted to keep it safe until someone could fight for it the right way." I showed her the key. She smiled faintly. "He told me about that. It's for the root cellar under the barn." "There's a barn?" She pointed past the thickets of pine. "Half a mile east. Overgrown path. But it's there." My legs trembled as I followed the trail she indicated. We passed old stones, moss-covered, trees twisted like they'd been frozen mid-scream. Finally, the barn came into view, weathered, leaning, but still standing. And, at its base, a trap door. I inserted the key. It turned with a heavy click. Inside was a staircase that led underground, damp and dark, but not forgotten. Marla lit a lantern. The cellar stretched wide, with crates along the walls. Inside were labeled boxes, arrowheads, woven fabrics, beads, photographs of excavation grids. My father's handwriting was on every label. He was cataloging everything, Marla said. Carefully, respectfully. My throat tightened. Why didn't he tell me? He wanted you to choose it, to choose to see. At the back of the cellar was a table. On it, a sealed envelope. I recognized the handwriting immediately, for Elena. My hands shook as I opened it. "If you found this," it began, "then you came. That means everything. I know I gave Ryan more on paper, but I gave you what mattered. I didn't leave you a gift. I left you a responsibility. You were always the one who listened, the one who looked deeper. This land needs a guardian. You don't owe me anything, but I hope you'll protect it." The letter ended without a signature. It didn't need one. I stood there for a long time, surrounded by the past. It was quiet, sacred, and for the first time since the will reading, I didn't feel cheated. I felt chosen. I didn't go back to the cabin right away. I sat outside the barn on a flat stone, watching the sun slip behind the treetops, letting the weight of my father's words settle somewhere deep in my chest. The envelope was tucked safely into my coat, but I could feel its presence like a pulse. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt burdened and oddly grateful. The next morning, I returned to the cellar with fresh batteries for the lantern and a notebook. I spent hours cataloging the contents, photographing the boxes, even sketching where each item had been placed. Everything had its order. Every artifact was labeled by hand. It wasn't a collection. It was a story, preserved in silence, waiting to be told. On the third day, I brought Marla back. She gasped when she saw the journal I found wedged behind a support beam. It was my father's. full of field notes, sketches of the valley, names of families he'd spoken to. One entry caught my eye. Elena is the only one who sat still long enough to watch the way ants rebuild after rain. I didn't cry then. I waited until night, alone in the cabin, staring at the flickering lantern, wondering what he saw in me that I had never seen in myself. That week, we drove to Missoula. Marla introduced me to the director of the university's Historical Conservation Department. They were stunned by the extent of the materials. A team was assembled. An official preservation proposal was drafted. I signed every document with shaken hands, knowing each signature was a promise. A week later, the story broke in the local paper. Daughter discovers hidden archaeological site on family land. I hadn't told Ryan yet. I didn't need to. The news traveled fast. He showed up uninvited, driving a Tesla that didn't belong on mountain roads. He stepped out in polished boots, frowning at the dirt on his cuffs. "What the hell are you doing?" he snapped before I could even speak. "I'm preserving the land." "No, you're sabotaging your own inheritance." "This is my inheritance," I said calmly. "A pile of rocks and feathers?" "A protected archaeological site, Ryan." "You're insane. You had your millions. Leave this alone." "This land has value, mineral value, development potential. It's legally ours. It's not yours anymore. The paperwork was filed last week. It's under conservation status." He laughed, short and sharp. "You don't get to make that decision without the rest of us." "There is no rest of us," I said, quieter this time. "You got what you wanted. I got what I needed. Dad wouldn't have wanted this. Dad built this. Every box in that cellar, every map, every note, his handwriting, his choices. He wasn't well at the end. He was lucid enough to trust me," I said, "and I'm not letting you undo what he spent the last decade protecting." That night, he called his lawyer. The cease and desist arrived 3 days later. My hands trembled as I opened it. Ryan was claiming mental incompetence in the final drafting of our father's will. He was demanding a reallocation of assets. He was trying to take back the land. I met with a pro bono environmental law firm in Missoula. Marla came with me, carrying the journal and photographs like they were armor. The legal battle began quietly. Emails, letters, petitions. Then came the news feature, then the podcast, then the headlines. People rallied. Former students of Marla, local tribes, environmental groups. They called the land sacred. They called it legacy. They called me a steward. I had never been called anything that powerful in my life. Ryan doubled down. He appeared on a talk show, painting me as a delusional recluse who'd fallen for our father's paranoia. But I didn't speak publicly. I let the artifacts speak. I let the land speak. The media loved the silence. They called it mysterious, noble. The judge requested a final hearing. I wore the same coat I had worn the day I found the key. When asked why I hadn't sold the land, I said, "Because value isn't always money." When asked what I hoped to do, I said, "I hope to give a voice to those who came before and never had one." When asked if I would settle, I said, "I already did. I chose peace." The ruling came swiftly. The will was upheld. The land remained under protection. Ryan left without looking at me. I didn't chase him. I walked back to the valley that night, wind soft against my face, the trees humming low. I stood at the threshold of the barn and whispered, "I did it, Dad. and for the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt whole. Spring came early that year. Snow melted into the soil like an old promise finally fulfilled, and green returned to the valley in soft, stubborn patches. The cabin still leaned slightly. The porch still creaked, but the air felt different now, fuller, like it was being breathed by more than just me. I spent my mornings cataloging, my afternoons answering emails, my evenings by the fire, rereading my father's journal like scripture. The university sent interns, 3 at first, then 5. They brought portable scanners, laptops, a 3D printer for modeling artifact replicas. I cleared out the back bedroom and turned it into a research room, lined with foam boards, artifact trays, and maps. The land was alive with questions, and for once I had the patience to listen. A preservation grant came through, then another. Local tribes reached out. I opened my door. I invited them in. We sat around the cabin's table, ate stew from chipped bowls, and talked about things that mattered: language, memory, honor. One afternoon, an elder named Thomas placed his hand over my father's ledger and said, "He saw what most people ignore. He remembered us." I didn't cry, but my hands did shake. A month later, Travis showed up. I didn't expect him. He knocked twice and waited, standing by his rental car in a pressed shirt that didn't belong in the forest. I opened the door slowly. "Hey," he said. "Hey. I saw the article, the interviews. Yeah? You're kind of everywhere right now." "Not everywhere," I said. "Just here." He hesitated. "I miss you." I leaned against the doorframe. "I miss the girl you left," I said, "but she's not here anymore." He nodded. I figured. "Did you come for her or for me?" "I'm not sure I know the difference anymore." "That's the problem." He didn't argue. He just stood there in silence while the wind played with the edges of his coat. "You're doing something real here," he finally said. "Yeah," I answered. "I am." "You don't need me anymore, do you?" "No," I said gently, "but thank you for loving the version of me you knew." He smiled sadly, turned, and left. I didn't watch the car go. I turned back inside and picked up the latest report from the conservation team. New discoveries, new grants, new names joining the registry of those who once lived on this land. The Carter Valley Cultural Center opened 6 months later. It wasn't grand, but it was honest wooden beams, large windows, and a room full of stories that had once been buried. I gave the opening speech in a linen dress that smelled faintly of pine. "This place is not about what we take from the earth," I said. "It's about what we return." When I stepped down, people clapped, not politely, not performatively, but like something had shifted. Like they saw me. Like I saw myself. Later that night, I walked the perimeter of the valley under a sky so full of stars it felt like the universe was holding its breath. I stopped at the barn. The door was slightly ajar, the lantern inside still glowing from earlier. I sat on the bench where my father used to take notes. I closed my eyes. I listened. No wind, no animals, just the soft hum of something sacred, something earned. And I thought, for the first time in my life, I know who I am. I'm not the girl they forgot. I'm not the afterthought. I'm the keeper of stories, the protector of silence, the daughter who stayed.